On the Level Talk Show.
You're tuned to On the Level with Ankhobia. This is Muta Baruka.
Get ready for some of the hottest talk on radio. The On a Level Talk Show addresses issues that matter to you.
Ankhobia with On a Level.
I was telling you a story about when I was
when
younger.
you was younger, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and
carry on.
Since we're talking about sports, I used to play netball a lot. I used to play county netball as well.
That's a good level.
And when I was young, we had this netball match, and the teacher, the coach, was taking us all home. And she says, because you're black, you must stick to things like running. You must never try and do things like swimming. And we were like, why? And she says, because your hips are too big. And because your hips are so big, when you're swimming, you won't be able to get through the waves in the way like, white people can. Of course,
right, okay.
We nearly killed that teacher in the car as black students. We didn't joke.
Well, the thing is...
And then...
Yeah, you carry on.
So she's saying now, so we mustn't swim, and we mustn't do any of the other athletic sports, because we don't have the brain power to think our way through these games. This is true. This is when I was a teenager. And so we must stick solely to running, because I was a very good runner as well. I was always doing the 100-meter running and the javelin. So she says, yes, you're very good at things like throwing and running, and stick to that. Then she drove us through this rich white neighborhood, and she said, you must never try to attain to get houses like this. We're like, what the hell are you talking about? She says, well, because you're black and you can't afford houses like this.
Was this in England?
This is in Wales.
Okay.
Where I grew up. She says, you'll never be able to afford houses like this. So trying to attain to buy houses like this will just upset you. You're not going to be able to afford to live in these kind of houses. So, I grew up in a big house. My house is probably bigger than hers, and I'm telling you, man, the next day, all of our parents were at that school, because it was like, you're not teaching our children this nonsense, But you imagine how much children in school have been told things like that, and they've been put off from achieving certain things.
I can sort of tell you a similar story.
Yes,
story
time now.
The NFL, which is the National Football League in the States, American football.
Mm.
Well, what's happening there is that a lot of, that there are a lot of black players in the NFL.
Yes.
But when it comes to getting coaching jobs, they can't make the grade for getting coaching jobs. And one of the things that's being said about some of the ex-black football players is that they don't do well in interviews. And I'm really a bit dubious about that.
It's something that I've never understood, because if it wasn't for those black players, there would be no
NFL. Yeah.
So what I've always said is that boycott those things and set up your own league, manage yourselves, because it's coming like some slave plantation. When you watch American basketball, sometimes, even with the football over here with the brothers, and like you say, the American football and basketball and things like that, it really hurts you to know that there are black players on the field. But all of the coaches, all of the administrators, everything is just white run. It's coming like one big plantation. And it's time for these athletes to say, you know what, it's the 21st century. We don't need you no more laters. We're going to set up our own league and do our own thing.
Well, on another level as well, if you look at in boxing now, in the heavyweight scene, and the heavyweights in terms of boxing used to be the holy grail of the fight game.
Yes.
There is no black heavyweight champion to be seen, and that's not a bad thing, and I'll tell you why. Because now the young black men are seeing other ways of making a living. They don't have to go out and get their brains bashed in anymore. They can actually make their living in other ways now, rather than going into the fight game. So that's no bad thing that's actually happening.
Yes.
It might be in terms of from a money point of view from the white establishment, but no bad thing. Some people might look at it negative. No black heavyweight champion. Oh, that's a disaster. No, it isn't. I tend to look at it, spin it a different way, personally. Yeah.
Who would have thought that would have happened? They always said, you know what they used to say, as long as a black man was hungry, a white man was going to get in that ring and actually win. But
maybe somebody eating well now, so they don't have to go out now, you see.
We shall be talking with the one and only Wayne Chandler, who was on a UK tour called Awakening the African Genesis. He's been speaking in Manchester, Leeds, Leicester and London. Tomorrow night, he will be in Birmingham. I advise you not to miss tomorrow night. He'll be talking about the way of the superior man and woman. And that's going to be 7 o'clock tomorrow at Beta First. That is at 47 to 50 Hockley Hill, down there in Hockley. It's only £5. 3 hours you're going to be spending with Wayne Chandler. And I know he's really going to tear it apart tomorrow. Excellent lecturer. Has so much information to share with people. And I'm just reading one of his books at the moment. It's very mind-blowing. The book Ancient Future. And like I say, tomorrow must not be missed. Now, Brother Pilot, I think you've helped my coughing to go a bit.
Well, yeah, I think it's just my whole persona being here. It's actually helped your physical ailments now.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're feeling much better.
Thank you.
You know, I always say about these types of events, it's good for everyone to go to these types of events, just to look at things from a different perspective. Because what tends to happen is that people who feel that, oh, that isn't about me, I've got nothing to learn from that, you know, I'm already affluent, I've got this, you know, in terms of, I'm looking for the word for it, for the right words to describe it. I've got all the refinements of the good life around me. So I don't have to go and listen to speakers coming to speak to me on African issues. And you really do need to. That's
yes,
one thing
because
I will
what he's
say.
going to be talking about tomorrow, the lecture is actually called The Way of the Superior Man and Woman. And he's going to be looking at the hermetic perspectives on the true nature of relationships between men and women and how to prevent failure by creating positive connections. Now, you know, relationships is such an important aspect of our lives. Big.
You're right, yeah.
Big topic. Really, I would like to see what he's going to do. But he's going to give you a sneak preview into that, I hope, on the second half of our show.
Reasoning empowerment for the community with Ankhobia on 98.7 New Style Radio.
Yes, that's what it is. New Style Radio 98.7 FM. We have Wayne B. Chandler in the studio. He's just arrived here and he's now ready to speak to the nation.
So I want to say thank you to the callers during the break who gave me some suggestions. One sister suggested that I should take white rum with black coffee to help with my cough. And Brother Beanie says, get some thyme, boil it with the garlic and the ginger. And it's funny because I was saying to him, this morning I was boiling some garlic and some ginger. And my mind says, put some thyme in there. And I thought, nah. And he's saying, no, put some thyme in there. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, it gives us a great pleasure to have with us Wayne B. Chandler. Welcome, sir.
It's great to be here.
Wow, I've been watching your DVDs for so long now, reading your books. Here, I get a chance to meet you in person.
Well,
I'm honored. I'm honored.
In the flesh. Live and in the flesh, as they say. And I must say, I'm looking at Wayne's physique. And
yeah, he looks very well, doesn't he?
He looks really kind of on the fit side.
Yeah, well, you know...
It's all an illusion.
But you are healthy, though, most certainly. You look very healthy anyway. You look very healthy.
I try. I make a strong attempt.
Okay, that's great. How's your tour of the UK going so far?
Incredible.
Yes.
It's beautiful. Yeah. I've had warm receptions everywhere I've gone. It's been great crowds. I've done Manchester so far and Leeds. Yeah, everything has been off the hook.
Okay, now tomorrow you're going to be in Birmingham talking about the way of the superior man and woman.
Exactly.
But before we go into that topic for the last hour of this show, tell us a bit about you. Who are you and, you know, what's your background?
My background is varied. I've explored many different disciplines, from history to and being very involved in these different disciplines, history to alternative medicine. So what I have done over the years is I have blended all of these different areas to show how they more or less support one another. Mm-hmm. So I try to look at my life in a holistic perspective and make the things that I've invested my time and energy into and incorporate those holistically.
Yes. One of the things that I do like about the work that you do, I was watching one of your DVDs on sexual energy, and you made a very strong comment at the start of the actual discussion, and you said that for many of us who have been engaged with history, you'd gotten to a stage where you realised that history wasn't enough to take us forward in our development as a people. That we had to incorporate the spiritual elements into that. Because sometimes people think that history by itself can change the people. And you said, no, there has to be other components that goes alongside the history that we have to look at.
Yeah. When I speak of history in that way, I'm referring to just, the academia. In academia, everything is very intellectual, it's very left brain. So you can't really deal with what's considered true change or transformation, from an intellectual perspective, because it just doesn't happen there.
Yes.
And as academics, historians, we have fallen short in terms of the other elements that we need to give, because our ancient civilizations, were holistic in terms of their approach to living and life. Their philosophies, weren't just a left brain dynamic. They also had like a right brain component to that, which allowed a total vision of what it was they needed to do and how they needed to do it. So you had what you thought, and then you had what you did.
Yes. And you're here now to share with us some of that knowledge as well.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, talk to us about the way of the superior man and woman. Are you married yourself?
No, I'm not.
Okay, but you have obviously have experience of relationships. You know what it is.
I hope so. Yeah.
You know what it is, 'cause it's a strange question to answer.
Good question, Sister.
But it's just that it's nice to know that if someone's coming to teach you about relationships,
they've had a couple.
They've had a couple of
They've been in
experiences.
some relationships, yes.
Yeah, most certainly. Tell us about the way of the superior man and woman. What is it that you want people to come out to tomorrow night to learn about?
As I've grown and worked in terms of trying to evolve myself, I've had certain revelations, some epiphanies, about different things with respect to the relationships between men and women. And one of the things that I've seen is that you really operate when you talk about like ancient civilizations and some of the spiritual laws that have been put into effect, which kind of created the infrastructure for many of those civilizations. They became guidelines, in terms of, how different individuals can follow different courses within their life, to make sure that those courses are straight and that they're coherent.
Yes.
One of the things we've lost, I can't even say lost, that we've probably never had in this particular culture, are things that tell us about who we are as individuals,
when you
who
say
we
this
are
culture,
as men.
You mean Western culture?
Western culture,
yes.
Western culture.
Yes, I agree.
That, who we are as women, who we are as men,
because
there are different characteristics for each, which means that there are different mindsets, there are different ways, that masculine energy perceives the world as opposed to how feminine energy, moving through a woman perceives the world.
Yes.
So one of the things that I strongly believe is that in relationship, if a man really doesn't understand the attributes and the mechanics of feminine energy, and a woman doesn't really understand those same mechanics of masculine energy, you're not going to have a relationship that works. And that's what I've seen over the years.
Yes.
I've seen relationships fall apart consistently because there is a divide between truly what is understood about the opposite sex. And so one of the things that I'm bringing to the table with respect to this presentation is getting people, for one, to have a clear understanding of where we derive a lot of our misconceptions, about the different perspectives that are gender-based. And then, what some of the characteristics, of feminine energy and masculine energy are, and why, we get lost in the mix when trying to just work together.
Okay, and you also said tomorrow night you want to show people how to create a positive connection.
Definitely.
With their partners.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, Wayne, in your promotion material for the events that you're participating in, you tell us that you're a trained martial artist in many disciplines. How has this assisted your development?
Well, for one thing, when you talk about martial arts, you're talking, the martial arts that I've done, you're talking about health, you're talking about longevity. It's not just a doing, again, I try to do things holistically, so I incorporate, the philosophical aspects, of my training as well as the actual training itself. So a lot of what I carry and bring to my life deals with the deeper philosophy, the deeper philosophical directions, which means the deeper sciences that I've explored in terms of health, longevity, and how they can benefit me, best suit me. And I try to give that information to those that I either work with, train with, or that I speak to in lecture.
And for the benefit of the listening audience, on Thursday evening at 7:30, the subject area there will be on health. So that's on Thursday, this coming Thursday. And what aspects of health will you be looking at in that particular...
Well, I'm going to look at the areas, that really pretty much are standing out, in our communities, the things that we wrestle with the most, and why those things come about. Looking at the cause and effect, basically.
High blood pressure, strokes, heart condition.
High blood pressure, strokes, different types of exercises that one can do, to alleviate some of those conditions, and some of the issues such as prostate issues, fibroids, things of that nature.
Big. Okay, let's go back to men and women relationships. What are some of the most common problems that you think are plaguing us as black people living in the West? What are the most common problems that are plaguing our relationships?
Well, the thing that plagues us the most is that we have a very linear and Eurocentric perspective on what constitutes relationship.
Yes.
And we're carrying the attitudes, the concepts, those ideas of another people, that really have nothing to do with us at all. And because we're doing this unconsciously, we take that element into the mix of our relationships. And much of the time, we're acting out, what we've been enculturated with. And we're doing it in a way that is very damaging, not only to just our partner, but also to ourselves. An example would be when you look at this culture, Western culture as a whole, it's a very sexist culture, and
patriarchal.
So very patriarchal, So in that means that there is deep disdain, for just feminine energy as a whole.
Yes.
One of the things that Western culture really pushes hard on men as a whole is to denounce and deny, the feminine elements and aspects within themselves, in terms of how we've all been created.
Yes.
So the fact that we deny that within ourselves means that, how can we really appreciate, embrace, and love our significant other, who is feminine and an expression of that if we are denying it and hating it within our own being.
We also find that in Asian cultures as well. But is that because of the Aryan influence, or is that...
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I suppose sometimes they couch it within, if we're examining the feminine within us, we're, going sort of homosexual, and that's how it's couched. That's how it's couched sometimes. So if it's if it's spun in that way, we will move away from.
That's how we're enculturated. Energy. We're enculturated to perceive it and experience it in that way, but it has nothing to do, with homosexuality or anything of that nature.
Yeah, because even when they were hating women, as the Greeks and the Romans, they were still dealing with homosexuality.
Homosexuality was a part of society in terms of Greece. Greek culture.
Yeah. Everything is broken down, and this is why I talk about, the different dynamics, which when you look at history philosophically, it gives us certain an infrastructure in which to frame things, So with respect to the law of gender, basically this law says that gender is in everything, which means that masculine and feminine energy is in everything in the universe, and it's how the universe is formed. So within every man, regardless of whether that man wants to embrace, acknowledge, or admit, there are feminine elements, and this appears physiologically, biochemically, as well as within how the mental apparatus is framed. And it's the same thing for women, within every woman, there are the elements. orgasm, for example, we think of the orgasmic response, but the orgasmic response in a woman cannot happen unless there's the masculine element of testosterone, which is evident and prominent in her body.
Yeah, that's true.
So masculine and feminine elements are incorporated into both men and women.
Okay. Now, your lecture tomorrow will also be examining the Hermetic perspective. I prefer to use the word Tahuti. I have problems with the word Hermetic, but that's how it goes. Tell us a bit about that. I mean, did the Hermetic perspective in that tradition, was there clear guidelines laid down as to how men and women should relate to each other?
Well, there were guidelines that were laid down in terms of who and what you were, as a total expression of a God being, which meant that you were not cultural creation, you were a universal, a divine creation. And so you embraced all of these different attributes, all of these different characteristics, and you went into relationship bringing everything that you could with respect to your understanding of that to the table. What we have today are individuals that are cultural creators, and cultural creation. So what we bring to the table are the thoughts and the mindset of somebody else.
Yes. And this is something that we've taken on as a result of the enslavement process of millions of Africans of people.
It's that, and it's even before that. Yeah, sure, exactly.
Okay, and you say before that as well.
Sure. I mean, when you look at the scourge and the onslaught, of the Indo-European culture, you're going back, 4,000 years into the past, So as they made their way over various territories and conquering different civilizations and overrunning different cultures and establishing their own cultural blueprint, those cultural norms, that were so prevalent during the time prior to their arrival just, were pretty much swept away in the dust.
Which is one thing I love about your book, Ancient Future. It really provides one with a clear perspective, a clear understanding as to how Europeans came into power, as to how Christianity was established to become one of the main religions in the world. All the evidence, the dates, the facts, everything is there. Yeah, how long did it take you to write that book?
I'm going to tell you, it only took me a year to write it, but I had been collecting information to go within the book for years.
Yes.
But it took me a year to write it, and I wrote every day, all day, and all night, literally. I would compile the information that I wanted to use for that particular day, and then all night I would write until probably about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
I'd sleep, for maybe about 3, 4 hours. I'd get up, and then I would start compiling information for the next segment that I wanted to work on. I did that for an entire year every day.
Yeah, it's a landmark book.
What really you call burning the candle at both ends, isn't it?
Oh, no question.
It's a landmark book. Excellent book.
Right.
Really is. Really
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You've also written The Brighter Side of Darkness, which deals with inner alchemy and spiritual transformation.
Right.
Can you just elaborate on that particular book?
Sure. The Brighter Side of Darkness, it also explores more deeply a lot of the things that we work with on a daily basis that we just are very much unawares of, with respect to like the law of vibration, for example. I go and take the law of vibration into emotional fields, and how emotional fields affect us, and how when we generate an emotional field directed at someone else, how it affects our own being, if it's a positive or a negative emotion. I talk about the organs in the body, how each organ, corresponds to a different emotion. And so if you're in an environment where you're always either being put upon or you yourself are just agitated constantly, which organs, come under duress, because of that particular emotional field that's being generated.
I'll have to read it to see what's
That's
happening with my throat. I have a cough. I have this cough. I was doing some painting, some gloss painting, and I inhaled the fumes.
Oh, yeah.
And my God, it knocked me for 6.
That's it right
You're
there.
not wrong.
Really
You sound a lot better now than you did last night, I tell you.
Yes. I took some stuff today, if only you knew. natural stuff, by the way. Natural and healthy things.
Right, don't forget that Wayne B. Chandler will be with us tomorrow night down at, and I'll tell you where, in Birmingham. And it's at the Beta First, 47 to 50 Hockley Hill in Hockley, Birmingham. And you can see that building just as you go over the flyover. So it's just by the Hockley flyover. Tickets there are £5, and you'll have the pleasure of Wayne's company from 7 until 10 p.m. in the evening. And I'll tell you, that's going to be well worth getting yourself down to.
Now, you're doing a nationwide tour. Why have you called it Awakening the African Genesis?
Why am I calling it that?
Yeah.
Why did Al call it that? He titled that, So I mean, this is, this was his brainchild, So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't tag it like that.
Okay.
But it's relevant,
It's relevant.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's look a bit more at the Hermetic tradition, because some people don't trace it back or even link it with ancient Kemet,
Right.
Egypt. Tell us a bit about that, because, like I said, reading your book, Ancient Future, it's really given me a whole different perspective on Tahuti. I learned about Tahuti from the Old Sale Set Society. But then reading your book, it really just kind of opened my whole kind of knowledge on Tahuti took it to another level altogether. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, you weren't the only one that was kind of caught off guard. I came across the Hermetic philosophy around 1970.
Yes.
And I began studying it then. And at some point when I was writing for the Journal of African Civilizations with Ivan Van Sertima, it was really a whole group of scholars, globally. And I just felt the need, to bring this information to the forefront, because I didn't know exactly how many of our scholars, were abreast of this information.
Yes.
That was found in the Hermetic axioms. So I wrote on that, and the history basically is that these were laws, universal principles, that kind of created the infrastructure, in ancient Kemet, Egypt. And they were taken out of Kemet at a later time and were transplanted into Greece. Mm-hmm. And that's where they became known as the Hermetic philosophy,
yes.
But they had their origin in ancient Egypt.
Yes.
So a lot of African scholars never, because they had it had fallen under the guise of the Greek philosophy, a lot of African scholars never looked for those laws there, so they literally got glossed over.
Yes.
But, like I said, I had been aware of them since 1970, so I just said it's time. And
yes.
so, I just
and
wrote on them.
So how does the African way of looking at relationships differ from the European way? Because when I'm in Africa, I see a clear distinction. And I think what's kept Africa going today is the family. It's nothing else but the family. And of course, at the basis of any family is the relationship between the man and the woman.
Definitely. Well, one of the things is that, and I'm not saying that African relationships are perfect.
Because they're not. Yeah.
No. But what I will say, especially as you go into different parts of Africa, you're going to find a different reflection, of how relationships are embraced and approached. Mm. But one of the things that you have to really acknowledge is that in Africa, because Africa was so strongly matriarchal,
yes.
that many of those elements still remain, within the various, cultural and community expressions there,
yes.
throughout the continent.
And when you say matriarchal, you mean for just so our listeners can understand what you're saying.
Yeah, matriarchal means that women, were running the show. That they were held in high esteem, respect, and their divinity, was embraced daily and was very deeply understood, in terms of the significance and, that significance. If I could just kind of frame it with symbolism. There's the sacred geometry, and one of the things in talking about feminine energy, they talk about the two interlocking circles. And of course, the circle is the geometric symbol, for feminine energy. And so it talks about this one particular interlocking geometric figure called the Vesica Pisces. And this is what our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, had to say about that. They said that the Vesica Pisces is the symbol for the creative feminine force that brought the material universe into being. It represents the fundamental energy which lies at the basis of all creation, and without it, nothing could be. To remove this feminine energy from all form and matter would bring about the immediate disintegration of the universe. Our ancestors had a very deep understanding of exactly how important feminine energy was, and so when you look at the matriarchal influence, of culture and civilization, it was an incredible investment in terms of literally building and putting humanity on the path to really a certain type of spiritual, enlightenment, just because of how everything was framed at that time, with the moon calendar. The way civilization and culture was set up is that we as human beings were always in touch with our telepathic, intuitive, and instinctive aspects, just because of how things, were set up, and structured.
The thing about the West is that they focus more on the mind. They focus on only what you can see in front of you, only what's tangible.
It's a left brain experience, and so our reality is very linear, and everything, falls into that. One of the things that I've been talking about in the other presentations that I've been doing, Time Bandits, is that when you look at the left brain, the masculine mind, one of the first and major characteristics is that it's time-bound. Whereas when you look at the feminine hemisphere, its major characteristic is that it's timeless.
Okay.
So anything that is time-bound sees limitation. So if you see limitation to anything, then you see death. If you see death, then you become death-oriented. So we live in a very death-based, death-oriented culture, because everything has a limit to it. Everything expires, like bad milk,
Yes.
Interesting, I have to say.
Yes.
I heard Wayne talking about the finite existence, but how do you get people past thinking about, situations being a finite, where there is an end?
Yeah, you have to really expose them to other aspects of themselves, which operate out of the right hemisphere. Because we're not exposed to the right hemisphere, and it's all woven in, to the fact that we really have great disdain for the feminine element in this culture. So we really don't want to embrace, the feminine aspect, because really that's the doorway to our liberation.
And we see that in Christianity. We see it in Islam, Judaism. When you look at those three religions, I've heard Mutabaruka say religion was created to oppress women. And I'm often inclined to believe him.
Well, yeah.
Because when you look at Christianity, you got the Trinity, three guys.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, the three guys.
No mention of the one female there.
No, you look at Islam.
Right.
And it's very, I forget what you call the priest in Islam. Imams. No.
Imams, okay.
Yes. When you look at them, they're all men. In fact, it's only the Nation of Islam who have put the first woman forward to be an imam, the first woman in the history of Islam. And if you look at Judaism, it's the same.
And I think all the prophets applauded.
Are males. All the people who wrote the books is males. They've totally left the women out of these books, out of these so-called religions. Yet they say they come to enlighten us, but it's from a totally male, wayward, I must say, perspective.
Sure, definitely. The way the culture is set up and the way, it has been structured is that it really imparts a very vast amount of illusion,
yes.
And we live this illusion day in and day out. We utilize 5 to 10%, on the average of our brain power, and we think that is some type of an amazing accomplishment. But it's 5 to 10% out of 100%. That's not amazing at all. That really,
tiny.
It's very tiny. If a teacher, who gave a test and had 100 questions on it, and the student only got 5 right, she wouldn't really look at that student like they were gifted, you know.
Yeah.
If you use 6%, you know, of your brain capacity, you're considered to be gifted. 6% out of 100, you know, you're still functioning on the level of Neanderthal, you know. So, you know, I mean, it's not, we use like a very small percentage, you know, of our brain, and of that part of the brain that we use, it's just the left hemisphere. You know, that's what we really focus on more than anything else. You know?
What can we extract out of the right side of our brain? What sort of elements can we extract?
Outside of unlimited potential and accomplishment, let me see. In the right side, you find the dynamics of relationship. You find the dynamics of your emotional fields. You find the higher brain circuits, which open up the higher doorways, gives you higher access to like higher levels of consciousness, you know, spiritual consciousness. All of these things, you know, are found in the right hemisphere. So basically, to put it very bluntly, the right hemisphere, and I'm sorry, brothers, you know, I know you're not going to like me for saying this, but it just is what it is. It's just the science, you know. But the right hemisphere, literally, you know, is the doorway to the divine. I mean, it is the cause, where the left hemisphere, the masculine hemisphere, is basically just the effect, you know.
Yes. Why have Europeans gone on such a rampage to turn kind of world history upside down, so that, you know, their culture is the one that's kind of on top, and they're the ones who are telling people how to be moral? This is what religion is, this is what life should be, this is how you live, and things like that.
Well, I think that, you know, power and control, when you have like an onslaught, you know, a conquering onslaught like they had, and they took over so much of just the global territories, you know, you want to retain that. So, I mean, if you're clever and you're smart, you devise a system, you know, to maintain and keep yourself in power, you know.
The Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they've done a very exceedingly well job.
So do we then have to recreate African culture? Is that what it's about? In order to kind of get our matrix to the forefront?
I think what we need to do is to not even necessarily recreate, but just reactivate, you know, that consciousness within ourselves, you know, because it still lives within us, you know. It's not something that we have to really discover again, you know. We just have to really reactivate it, you know, because it's there. It's just dormant.
I noticed with a lot of our scholars, when they begin to do this kind of work, they look a lot to Indian and Chinese philosophies, but surely there must be practices on the continent of Africa today where these things are happening. But I don't see books being written about the various African traditions that deal with yoga and things like that, and breathing techniques, and how to, you know, access higher states of consciousness.
They're just now coming out. I have a couple, and they're written by African authors, you know, out of Africa. And you know, I mean, when I got the first one, I was really very impressed, and I was very amazed, you know, at the depth of the information myself, because it's right on par with anything and everything, you know, that is coming out of China, that's coming out of India. And, you know, the other thing, too, that needs to be understood is that the first civilizations in India and China, you know, were black civilizations, you know, and that's very important. So, you know, when you look at like the Indus Valley civilizations, which really laid the foundation of the spiritual sciences, when you look at the Shang and the Xia dynasties in China, which laid the foundation, which basically has been unchanged, you know, over several thousands of years, talking about black people, you know, that have created the cornerstone of these cultures. You know, so
that's why your lecture is called Awakening.
But then again, you know, Sister Ankhobia, you said something there, and I don't think it's a bad thing learning from other cultures. To be honest, because there is something to be learned from looking at other cultures.
I can see that, but the problem is, and there's a big gaping hole in African scholarship, where they are not going onto the continent of Africa to do the research that needs to be done. It's a massive hole. They look at ancient Egypt as the pinnacle of African civilization.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I haven't got a problem with that. But then there's Nigeria, there's the Congo, there's Benin. There's so many other African nations that we need to begin to research and do the work. But what you have in African scholarship, black scholarship, is a kind of I think sometimes it's like a class thing going on, where they look upon West Africa and these places as nothing, as uncivilized. And so they won't go there and do the research.
Right.
Europeans then go there and do the research, and then they just quote from what these Europeans are saying. But let us go there. I was in Ghana the other day, and I've yet to play this interview. I think I'm going to play in about the next 2 to 3 weeks. I interviewed an African priest when I was out there, and he blew my mind. And I'm sure when I play the interview, it was going to blow a lot of people's minds, because he was showing how, with the fall of Egypt, how the various groups that left Egypt dispersed throughout Africa,
exactly.
And the knowledge systems they then took throughout Africa,
exactly.
And where you can go exactly and find these various knowledge systems.
How did he show you that? Did he show that in book form, paper form?
No, we were reasoning. He had some information.
Was it memory form?
We were reasoning. It was an interview, it's information that he has.
That sometimes is the problem, you see, with the African diaspora, because things are passed down verbally, and some of the important information is not written down.
Oh, no, he's setting up a school.
It gets lost.
No, he's setting up a school, actually, where he can pass on this knowledge. What I'm saying in the first place is that African scholarship in the diaspora, scholars need to reassess their attitude towards Africa and to get onto the continent and do the research, do the work. It's not just ancient Egypt. Do the work. The information's there.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it's very powerful. I mean, it's like I said, I believe that much of what is there on the continent today at this moment, is just as, if not more, substantial and powerful, than what is found in India and China at this moment. I've had workings and encounters, with African Sangomas, and I've seen them do things, using energy that, just is mind-boggling.
Things like what?
Like, just healing, like the body, and being able to do that at great distances, and
without touching the afflicted individual.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, their science. I think the thing that we have to take into consideration that we don't many times is that during the period of colonization, the Sangoma, the African shaman, they were the first who were hunted because they carried, the jewels.
Power.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they had to go underground. They knew that they had to disappear because they knew they were going to be the first ones to be hunted and destroyed. So they went underground, and they took that cultural information and science with them. And so that's why when people began to look at the continent of Africa, they didn't see anything. And it's not that it wasn't there, it was just hidden. Because it had to be hidden.
It had to be hidden. I was doing some research last year, and it was interesting that in Jamaica, during the period of enslavement, those persons who were called Obia men and women, they were the ones who started most of the actual revolts. And so what they would do when they were caught, they would murder them in such a brutal way to send a message out to any Africans on the plantation: do not deal with your indigenous African spiritual practices.
Right.
And that was also a way to pass Christianity onto them. And I think that's why some of us are afraid today to deal with our own traditional religions.
I agree with that.
And we deal with things like Christianity. And it's not to knock anyone who's a Christian. My mum's a Christian, for what it's worth. And so it's not to knock anyone who's a Christian or who's a Muslim, because we understand, how we got these actual religions. But it is to try, I think, if we can in our lifetimes, to look to the continent of Africa, our homeland, and to see what spiritual traditions exist there that we can perhaps learn from.
Sure.
That can give us a new way of looking at life on this planet, because all we have at the moment is a Eurocentric, a European way of looking at life. And as the brother will show you tomorrow, when we deal with our relationships, again, we're coming with preconceived, inbuilt ideas about men and women and things like that, because of the culture we've been born into. A culture which is alien, totally alien to our way of being.
Yeah, and if you wanna hear more of Wayne Chandler. Tomorrow night, the Beta First. That's 47 to 50 Hockley Hill, Hockley in Birmingham. That's B18 5AQ. The tickets are £5, and you'll have his company from the hour of 7 o'clock until 10 p.m. And will there be a question and answer session?
Of course, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, it's the last 7 minutes of the show. Just tell our listeners, in the 3 hours they're going to spend with you tomorrow, what can they come and learn about themselves and about relationships?
They're going to learn a lot of, who they truly are, what elements, they carry and how they can, really refine and cultivate those elements and take them into a relationship to help that relationship flourish and thrive. And I'm really hoping that a lot of men come out, because a lot of times men have a tendency to want to shy away from these things. And it's very important for them to be there if indeed they're interested, in their own self-development. Because, it's about the development of the individual, because, the individual has to develop, in order to bring like what needs to be brought to the table for a really strong relationship.
Yeah.
The individual has to be strong as well. So it's about individual growth as well as, what comes into the mix, between men and women, So I think everybody's going to get pretty good experience, and look into, how they work.
Yes, excellent.
Well, I certainly will be there tomorrow
Yes,
night.
I'll definitely be there, folks.
Oftentimes when I go to these types of events, I see too many of the converted. What we really want to see is people who want to sort of get some knowledge, get themselves to a higher level of knowledge.
Yes.
And
Branch out.
we want to see people who we don't normally see at these types of events.
Yes.
So if you've got your fancy car and you feel like it's not for me, please don't. It absolutely is, because relationships, if we don't get them right, how are we going to really form a strong community of people, as we all would like to?
Yes, I agree. Wayne, last few words with you. Speak to our folks out there.
I'm just hoping that everyone comes out, I mean, this has been a really great doorway, into Birmingham.
Yes,
I feel honored to be able to speak, to the people.
Okay, great. For those of you who don't know how to get down to Beta First, if I'm correct, Beanie, it's just after the flyover, isn't it? As you're heading towards town?
Yeah,
that's right.
You're getting towards town, but you have to come down under the flyover.
Yep, that's definitely right.
Go up the side and then do a U-turn and
Come to the mic.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're coming from Answorth side, you have to go down on the side, on the left side, and go up, or you can go to the end of the road. It's better to go to the end of the flyover. Go at the light and do a U-turn and come back in yourself.
Yes.
Keep to the left, and Beta First is that greeny building there before you get to Mohammed Ali Centre. If you go past Mohammed Ali Centre, you've gone too far. You have to come back up the road. Just walk back up the road.
Okay.
That's where it is.
So make sure you're there tomorrow night.
Yeah.
And come and learn about the way of the superior man and women. Learn about the nature of relationships. Learn about your true nature as a man and as a woman. Learn how you can prevent failure in your relationship by creating positive connections. Our brother Wayne hasn't given too much away tonight, because obviously he wants everybody to come along, but he's given us enough juice to go away with and to think about.
And very quickly, Sister Ankhobia, don't forget Thursday night, 7:30, a health discussion with Wayne, and the price £4. So that's well worth attending as well.
Yes, because he looks very healthy himself, I must say. Thank you, Brother Pilot, for coming in and supporting me.
Thank you for inviting me.
With my cough. I apologise to the listeners.
I've enjoyed every minute of it.
I apologise to the listeners for my coughing. It's just one of those things. I have a slight cough. Thank you, Wayne, for coming into the studio.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I shall definitely be there, and I won't be coughing over everybody. So don't worry. I will not be coughing over you. So take care, and we will see you tomorrow night. God bless.
Looking forward.